And I think we are live. Awesome. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. My name is Jack Hayes. This is the Weekly Prophet. Once again, I'm showcasing one of the key areas I like to, a big part of just entrepreneurship in general is you go through a lot of change. And I think highlighting more people in the travel industry, in the travel space, it's one of the most changing environments you can put yourself in. So today we have the pleasure of speaking with Lou Colmenares, a writer, educator, and cultural advocate. Lou has dedicated her career to promoting cultural awareness and understanding through her work in education, media, and the arts. She's also the host of the Solo Female Traveler podcast, where she shares her experiences as well as those of like-minded individuals. Lou, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. Obviously, we hadn't met before this, so it'll be like our first conversation and the whole world gets to hear it. So
I know, yeah. I like that. And thank you so much for that introduction. It was really cool.
No problem. So we were just talking a little bit before, and I wasn't even going to start here initially, but I think it's a great way to kind of preface, how you've gotten the opportunities you've gotten now, because you discussed you're an immigrant from Venezuela.
Yes. So I came to the United States 9 years ago. So I was just looking for better ways to live my life because I have better opportunities as well, because I have pretty much zero opportunities back in my country. So I got again the opportunity to come to the United States as an au pair, and then I was able to stay here. So that's a little bit about myself and how I came here.
Yeah, no, that's super cool. And now, where did take me through the experience of when did you first kind of decide, okay, what was it that triggered, okay, I need to go to the US? And then how did that process start? I know you came here 9 years ago, but to my understanding, and of course I haven't been there, so I don't know, what's the process like before you're actually, you're here?
Well, the process before that, so my country was under a socialist government that socialist government that were pretty much communist. So the process started just when I was a teenager. I was like, this is not normal. And going, watching TV, and in TV back in Venezuela, you watch a lot of American shows and a lot of American movies. So you kind of have this ideal of the United States, like, oh, if I move to the United States, I'm going to have the perfect life, which we can discuss more about that. But But that's what I thought at the moment. And I was just always looking for opportunities. Also, I don't know if you or any of your listeners have always had this feeling of not belonging to the place you grew up in. At least that was my case. I never felt that I belonged there. And I was always looking for ways just to emigrate and to leave. I was like, there has to be more to life than this. And I started, and then I went to college. First, I studied biochemistry for 2 years, realized that it wasn't my thing. I graduated high school when I was 15. So right there, I had to choose what I had to study. And, my dad just was like, just study biochemistry. I'm like, okay. And then 2 years later, I'm like, no, I don't really like this. And then I went for hospitality. And that kind of opened up more my view of the war. And I remember I was learning in that university, I was learning English and I was learning French, and I started dreaming about traveling and working in different parts of the war. And actually I went to an internship in the capital of my country, because I was studying, I am from a small town. I was studying in a small town, a small college town. So I went there and I saw the slogan of, I was walking at a mall and I saw a slogan that said, work and travel in the United States. I was like, I don't know what I need to do, but I'm just going to do it. And I actually applied twice to be an au pair. The first time I was rejected. And then the second one, I was rejected because my English wasn't good enough. So then a year and a half later, I saved some more money. And then I remember I was on YouTube and any online platform that I could get on to learn English. And I was studying English 5 hours a day for 2 months until I was able to be fluent and pass the interviews. And then a family from the United States chose me. So that was kind of the process.
That's super cool. So you had a host family when you first got here. Now, what was your first, did you have a job when you first got here, or was it school that you did first?
So I came as an au pair, right? So
Mhm.
the deal as an au pair is that you come and you work for a family as a nanny, and then
Oh, okay.
yeah, and
Cool.
then you get some college credits, but it's nothing too formal.
Gotcha. Okay, very nice. And how long were you doing that? And then like when did the podcast start exactly? Like how long after you got to the US did you start kind of having the experiences and then want to get into the podcast a lot deeper?
Of course, yeah. So a lot happened before I started the podcast, honestly.
Yeah. Okay.
So I came in 2014, and then the podcast started in 2020. So it was
Okay.
6 years before that. I had to figure out my way to stay here legally, and
Okay.
then I have two associates, one in social and behavioral sciences and one in teaching. So education, like I love to study, and at least this one I was able to finish, because the
Yeah.
hospitality one I didn't finish because I emigrated here. And then after that, once I was able to get out of the United States legally, I was like, okay, I want to travel. Like I have the money to travel, and I am comfortable enough to do it. And I remember I started traveling first to Colombia, and then many parts in South America, then went to Asia, Europe, and then the idea for the podcast hit when I was in Southeast Asia in 2018. And I just realized that 90% of the time I was the only woman from the American continent traveling alone. So that kind of like got me thinking, like, why why why, like this is such a beautiful continent, and it's so easy to travel to, and it's so cheap, but why are so not so many. Sorry, there's construction downstairs. Can you hear
No
it?
worries. You're
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, the idea hit in to 2018, and so yeah, I was like, okay, why am I the only woman here? And I used to start thinking, what like is it lack of information? Is it lack of role models? Is it just fear? Or but because if it is fears, it goes deeper than just traveling to a different continent. So anyways, I had that idea, then I had to come back. I moved to Chicago, and then when the pandemic started in 2020, I was, we all were isolated. We had too much free time. So I was like, okay, now it's time to start working on this idea. And that was it. And it was very scary at first, because I was like, okay, I'm starting a podcast on my second language. Will people listen to that? And I have, and I,
It's your second language and you're starting a whole like you're putting yourself in that like uncomfortable situation like consistently on purpose, but people respect that a lot. I think that's a big, and we'll talk about the social media side a little bit, but like that's an underrated part. Like you want to be authentic and people can respect that a lot. They'll see it as like you said, you're paving a way as far as like the fact that you had the awareness to notice, oh, like I'm one of the only females like on this trip that's traveling alone. Like those are the keys that they talk about when you have like a good idea. Like those are the little reasons. It doesn't just happen. It's like no, like you have to be culturally aware to kind of notice that. Now, how do you see the intersection of culture and personal identity?
oh, that's a good question. I I believe that culture is a big part of our personal identities, especially the culture we grew in. And if you think about it, we set our goals based on the culture we're in. Something, for example, that I love about the culture in the United States is the culture of success. In here, no one is envy about someone else that is successful. You can have people driving Ferraris and Porsche and Lamborghinis and on the streets, and unless you're in a really bad area, I mean, no one is going to really do anything bad to you. So, going back to to my story, like I believe that culture really shapes your identity. For example, one of the things I was dealing back in my country, and especially in the very small town I am from, is that over there the culture is shaping a way where women's value is based on just having a family, on just maintaining your husband, and nothing wrong with that. But that's not how I couldn't identify with that, and that's why I was always like looking for different places to be on. And then I immigrated to the US. I have to reshape my identity, and I was like, okay, I really like the cultural expectations of this country, so maybe it's a good place to stay. And I did, and also because here entrepreneurship is so valued, I was like, okay, maybe it's my time to start something else. And that's so yeah, that's what I did. And yeah, so I think that you and, for example, Sam, the friend in common we have, you guys are like so young, and you are in this culture, so definitely you guys have a good foundation for success.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And it is cool to hear you say, like, just the fact you even use the entrepreneurial spirit as like an aspect that you felt when you got here. It's very valid. And I hope it kind of, my whole point of the show is to kind of remove the limitation people have that entrepreneurship is difficult and it's risky and it's this and it's that, and it's like the negative side to that. Is it like, are you betting on yourself? Yes. But when you know, like you said, like when you feel like you're not in, or you don't feel like you're in the environment that necessarily suits you, yeah, that's where I felt, and that's where a lot of my entrepreneurial ventures stem from. And it's like, as soon as I got around the environment of people who, they made it feel like it was okay to think that way. Whereas I'd been in an environment for a long time where that was like restricted and like kind of not frowned upon, but why are you being different? And now it's a lot different because I'm in Miami and there's culture and entrepreneurship. Everyone, I always say it, if you want to live in Miami, you have to hustle to be here. So it's like, you're usually around hustlers.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the culture of that place. And you identify more with that. And that also has had an influence on your own identity, that where you see yourself as a quote unquote hustler or an entrepreneur. And something about, for example, that I compare the United States and, South America, Latin America, is that here there's more tolerance for failure. For example, at least I can only speak for my country. I know, like in Venezuela, and from the part I am from, it's like, oh, if you fail, you fail. Like, oh, you're a failure. You're a failure. So it's like people are afraid to actually start new things and do new things. But for example, here in the United States, you have places like Silicon Valley as well, where CEOs are always looking for ideas, and they are not afraid to fail. And actually, I read a book that said that in Silicon Valley, I don't know, I haven't seen this myself, but it says that actually in Silicon Valley, a common question people ask within themselves is like, okay, how many times have you failed? And that's actually, that's a really good way to see things.
Yeah, no, I've never heard that about. That's cool. I'm going out to California for the first time the end of this month. So I always hear Silicon Valley. I don't even know what it is or what it looks like, but like, yeah, like I know Microsoft or Google or something's out there. So I'm like, yeah, it sounds cool. But that's interesting to ask people about that. You kind of just touched on it, but I want to go now to one of the podcasts I did listen to. It was your episode with Caitlin Lunis. And a big theme I pulled from that one was about how it was like, you are where you go. And you guys discussed this concept of normal around the world. So can you take us into that a little bit? How have you seen normal, like, change? Like, what, maybe take me through an experience kind of on that topic.
Yeah, of course. So, yes, also normal depends on the place and culture you grew up in. In some places, now that you are going to go to California, for example, and if you go to Los Angeles, and a specific part of Los Angeles, you're going to see a lot of plastic surgery. Is that normal? In that place, it is, because a lot of people do it. Right. In my country, an example I always use is that, and again, I am from this small town not close to the Amazon, so we eat a lot. We eat capybaras for Easter. So when I tell people that we eat capybaras, people are like, what? That is so weird. But for us, it's so normal because it's part of our culture. It's part of the traditions I grew up with. I will then eat capybaras here in the United States right now, but if I go back home, I probably won't. And also another experience that I used to illustrate this point about what is normal and what it isn't is a time, again, when I was in Southeast Asia. That trip was life-changing. That's what I got the idea for the podcast, and I did so many quote-unquote weird things. It was that I was in this small town in Vietnam, and the thing that people does there is that they eat dogs, like dog dogs. Like here, dogs are pets, and over there people eat them. And at first I was like, what? Like, this is so weird and so disgusting. I love dogs, I love pets, and people in here eat them. But then after a while, after being few days there, I realized that, okay, it's weird for me because I'm not used to, but these people is like, they eat this almost every day, and it's what they have in there available for them to eat. So it's not weird, it's just different. And again, what is weird and normal will depend on the place you grew up in and the culture you grew up in.
Right. Yeah. It's all you're always going to relate back to like home, and like whatever is different from home is going to be interesting. Yeah, but it's cool. It's cool. And the more you put yourself in those environments, like in the different environments, I want to talk about a theme of change a little bit. I don't even have it really in my notes. I was listening to something this morning, and there's a music artist I listen to, and his whole thing is like this last year, he just lived in like a different city every month. And he cause he felt like his best ideas were flowing, and like he would write a lot more music. So I'm curious, like, how has traveling taught you to handle change, and how has, like, kind of talk to us a little bit about that theme of change that you see in travel, and how people can, I guess, become more adaptive to it, and like, more comfortable with change through travel.
Right. So the first thing about travel is that you're putting yourself in a different environment, in a different situations, because we get comfortable, we get used to our routine, our day-to-day, the same people we see every day, and that's it. It's just comfortable, and there's like no place for new ideas, new thoughts, nothing. So when you travel, you get exposed to this new environment. Everything is new to you. You are more present. You are also more relaxed because you are not under stress. You are probably under the stress of the trip and getting there, and like if you miss the flight. But it's nothing like that will create as much cortisol as if you have a problem at work or something is not going on your way. And then also when you travel, you get exposed to new ways of doing things. For example, people in Vietnam eating dogs, in Venezuela eating capybaras, and also you start like be so present and being so aware that you start noticing things in that place that relate to you and that relate to your life back home. And also, as you mentioned at the beginning, that I had that awareness to notice that not too many women from the American continent were traveling. So you also, just the fact that you are more present, it gives you that awareness, those ideas, the fact also that you don't have the same routine, that you don't have, that you're not eating the same things, like your senses are more aware as well. And also there are some studies from, I don't recall the names right now, I can send them to you later, but there are some studies from different universities about how when you travel, your brain starts creating new neural connections as well. So that's also like for creative people, and I believe that we are all creative people. That's very important as well. And there's another study that where they were measuring how creative people was after traveling, and they found that when they traveled to a place where they were exposed to a new language, and then when they were trying to learn it, when they came back home, they were 10 times more creative. So definitely, when you travel, it's a lot of change. There are now the studies that you start creating new neural pathways, and that it helps you with creativity. So yeah, it's very beneficial to get out of your everyday routine, because we get comfortable, and then when the brain is so comfortable, again, there's no space for new ideas and for creativity and even for energy, because a lot of people that is always doing the same thing, having the same routine, like you see them like they are not excited about life. They are just living the day to day and just existing, and nothing good is going to come up from that. You need that new energy. You need to renew yourself. You need to rest, and what better than resting in a place that you're not familiar with.
Right. And I don't know if we were talking about you're currently studying psychology, but obviously you have a diverse background, a few different areas. What do you think holds people back from experiencing at least trying to experience exactly what you just talked about?
Yeah, this is for this I cannot give a general answer, because first I don't have my degree yet, and second, everyone is a different individual. But something I will always say is that one of the main emotions that make people being afraid, of course, is fear. And fear can come from so many different places. It could have been an experience you had as a kid, or something that you were lacking throughout your life. So, and again, not having a role model, not having an example, because at least in my family, no one ever traveled. I know it was because fear and cultural expectations, and just probably finances as well. But behind of those arguments is fear. Again, because if you're lacking, if you don't have the right finances, it's because you are afraid of making more money, probably. If it is cultural expectations, it's because you are afraid that people won't like you. And then if you don't have a role model, we have the internet now. We have YouTube. Like for me, when I was growing up, there was this show of this woman traveling around the country, and I used to watch it. I believe it was every Sunday, and that was what sparked the idea in my head. I was like, oh, I want to travel. So yeah, so fear it is, but then if you really want it, you can make it happen. I know it sounds like Gary Vee. If you want it, you make it happen, but I know it's not that easy. People have to go through their own processes, but if you really want something, you can plan for it, and you can set yourself up for success and make it happen.
Yeah, and there's a couple points here. Like it's exposing yourself to the knowledge. Like you said, the resources we have now didn't always exist. You could listen to 5 or 6 of your podcast episodes and probably simplify it right away. Like even just hearing that last guest we talked about, like her experience of like how she made that trip come together, like just studying abroad, but then seeing how if she went to this place, she could go to all these other places at the same time. Like those are the little hacks you can learn. And I wasn't sure if she made that point or you made that point, but either way, it stuck with me. It was like, okay, if I put myself in an area that's close to these other places, I don't have to take a separate trip to get these different experiences. It can all kind of be wrapped into one. That's simply choosing I want to expose myself to the knowledge in what I want to do. And now we have like those opportunities. So I think that's super cool. Yeah.
About that episode also, I know she traveled to all 7 continents and did great things, but when we say travel, it doesn't have to be going to Antarctica, for example. You can, I am in Chicago right now. I can go to Wisconsin for the weekend. I can go to, I can go to Milwaukee, to Michigan, and I am still traveling. And so I also make that point that, we all have comfort zones. And if your comfort zone is just staying in your city, go to the next city, or go to the next state. Just don't compare yourself to travel influencers or to the guests on my podcast that they have been everywhere. I even myself fall into the trap because I haven't been to Antarctica, for example, but it's like, it's my life. They have theirs, and that's it. And I just do what is good for me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I really like what you said, how you can like, it's like creating the small habits. And we talk about that all the time. Like you can go to the different coffee shop that you don't go to every other week and get a new experience. And the same thing happens. Like I notice Miami, there's all these different new places and it's cool and it's artistic. But I try to take advantage of that because if I don't go to the same place every week to do the same work, then that's where you get the new ideas. That's where you have the different conversations. They attract different types of people like and people don't know that, but hopefully they listen to a podcast like this. They're like, oh wait, yeah, maybe if I do put myself at a different style of this or a different place like this, I will kind of spark those new ideas. And all you need to do is build momentum. Like momentum is so big. How now tying it back a little bit to the podcast again, how have you been able to stay so consistent with obviously educating yourself on the space, but then also presenting it to an audience and like providing value in that aspect of it?
Well, honestly, that has been a struggle. So I am still figuring it out. At first, I remember I was excited. I know you talk about momentum. When you start a new project, you have that excitement. And then if you're consistent, you start building that momentum. But at first I was excited. I was like recording and like reaching out to guests and I was recording as I went. So it's like if I record one episode this week, I will post it on Saturday. Or and yeah, I was just doing it like that. I had no structure. I had nothing. I was just doing what I knew at the time. Then I got burnt out and I stopped the podcast for about 3 months. And I was planning on just leaving it there. But then I got a DM from a listener saying like how much they like the podcast. And then I was invited to speak at another podcast. And I was like, okay, maybe I shouldn't quit. So I start again. And I was like, okay, I'm going to batch record now. But and then I'm going to outsource. So I have a girl that my editor, Fede, I love her. So she's in Argentina. She edits my audios and she adds her own touch to it. And you know, that's also something to think about. Like outsourcing is so important because, for example, editing a podcast episode, it will take me 3 hours. But for her, it will be like 20, 25 minutes. And she is already an expert at it. So I start outsourcing and now I post by seasons as well. So I batch record, I send everything to my editor and then I just, then she has everything ready and then I just post by week. And I do by seasons. And when I end this season, I take like 1 or 2 month break, depending on how I feel. And that's what I do. And actually, right now we're recording the season 7 of the podcast, and I am very close to burn out, but not because of the podcast, but because of classes and all different projects that I'm starting. So also, it's funny that you asked me that because I'm like, I figured out the podcast part, but I'm still working on the life part.
Yeah, no, that's no problem. That's great advice, right? I think my podcast journey is very similar. Once I exposed myself and I saw that the guys I was watching were batch recording, I was like, oh, wait, maybe I should try that because I was doing the same thing. It was like record, release, record, release. I was like, wow, like you shoot an episode on Friday and then you're editing all day on Saturday and then I'm trying to release it on Sunday. And instead, like this week, I've got 2 today and like I was supposed to have 1 yesterday. I got another one this weekend. I'm like, great, March is covered. Let's move on to April and start seeing what that looks like. But yeah, no, that's great advice. Definitely, if you want to get in the podcast game, there are ways to balance it, right? Like batch record, you know, and listening to yourself, right? Like you said, once I felt burned out, took 2 or 3 months off. And then it's probably not by coincidence that somebody DM'd you, you know, within that period while you were taking a break and was like, oh, like, hey, maybe you shouldn't like give this all the way up yet. And it turned into this, right? Like, who knows if you would have had the idea to batch record if they would have never DM'd you. You never know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So again, you just start and then you start figuring it out as you go. Like you will never, and I think this is a good advice, just for anything that you start, not only it's a podcast, it's like you will never have everything figured out. You will start and then from there you will learn and that's about it. and also something that I've learned on this journey is just learning that I'm not the best one I'm not the best in many areas. I'm really good in some areas and I have my genius zone, but then I've been learning to outsource what is outside of my genius zone. So at the beginning, I was like, should I outsource? Should I not outsource? And now that I did, I'm like, oh, cool. So like this person does it much better, much faster. And also it makes you think like, okay, how much valuable is my time? So I start thinking that, those 3 hours that I used to spend releasing episodes, I could use on something else.
Yeah, and it's like they talk about all the time. It's what the most successful people do. I've never heard the genius zone. Where did that stem from? And can you kind of take us into that? Like, how can we identify what our genius zone is? I think I understand a little bit of what you mean, but I've just never heard it portrayed in that way.
Of course, yeah. So the genius zone are things that you're naturally good at. For example, I will use myself as an example. So for example, something I am naturally good at is talking to people or just talking. I'm just really good at talking. I love talking. That's why I have a podcast, because I cannot shut up. So I'm really good at that. I'm really good at that, at reaching out to guests. I'm really good at memorizing things. That's within my genius zone. What I'm not good at is designing. I'm not good at editing. I'm not good at many other things that have to do with the whole social media part of starting a business or a podcast. So that's outside of my genius zone. So again, your genius zone are things that you're naturally good at, that come easy to you and that you enjoy.
Very cool. Now we'll start getting in kind of the end of this a little bit. I do always like to ask this: what are you most excited about right now?
What I am most excited about, just enjoying what I've been building. So the podcast, it's doing really great. I'm going to school right now, finally, for a bachelor's degree, which took me 9 years to do this. Then also I'm setting up my speaking career. I already have an event coming up at the end of the month. And then also I'm starting a photography business on the side. So I'm like studying a lot of things, but what I am most excited about is enjoying all of this, because I haven't planned for free time. And I know I can tell how that is taking a toll on my mental health. So I'm sharing this because I know that it's easy. It's like, oh yeah, I did this, I do that, and I do all this. But then also it's important to plan time for yourself and for your mental health, or just watching Netflix. Watching Netflix, if you're doing it with the intention to rest, it's not really a waste of time. So I am excited for just enjoying everything that is happening in my life right now.
Very cool. Now, I want to go here because my sister is getting ready she has a remote job and she's been living in Austin for like the last 2 years, but she is about to take a year where, very similar to what we talked about earlier, that kind of live in a couple different cities. She wants to go abroad. What would your advice be for someone who's working remote and is planning to go do like their first, I would say, extensive travel trip?
Sure. So I haven't been a digital nomad myself yet. I haven't been able to figure that part out. But something that I have seen from friends that are doing it is that just settle them. They go to a new city and they settle themselves first in the city. And then once they all settle, they go out to new places and stuff. There are also like Caitlin Lubas that you mentioned here. I saw the other day she was scuba diving, so she will go scuba dive for some time, then come back, do some work, go scuba dive again. So there's not like just one answer that I can give, because it all depends on what she can handle. Right. I know I couldn't be, if I go to scuba dive, that will be the only thing I will do for the day. I cannot just, I have also some friends that are skydivers, so they will go jump off the airplane, go do some work, go again, jump off the airplane. When I did skydiving, I just did it that day and I had to take a nap because it was like a lot of adrenaline. So again, she has to she has to figure out her own rhythm. And also I don't know, she might not do it the first month, but then she will find what works for her.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's good advice. Like, take the time to realize it's a completely new place. You're going to have to create, just like you had to create a new routine in the city you just moved to, be the same thing. And then you'll be at your highest level with everything else you do. I could totally see that as a mistake I've made myself, but like just the excitement of being there, but then feeling all this pressure, like you have to like work really hard and like do all these things. Like, no, you need to be in the best mental shape that you can. And then you need to go do these other things. Like they can really, it's intentionally just waiting to make sure you're in the right headspace. So that's good. Like budget a couple weeks off work when you first get in, make sure you're comfortable where you're at, then start kind of going after the new adventures. Now here's one I like to ask. What's one question you have for the host?
One question I have for the host. Okay, you cut me off guard here. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so one question I have for you. Okay, how old are you? This is not a question, but
22.
Okay, so a question that I have for you is that everything that you do right now, do you think that is everything you will be doing for the rest of your life?
Yes, because I don't want to give you the in-between answer. Well, let's put it this way. Everything that I'm doing right now, no. Short answer, no. It definitely won't be everything that I'm doing right now because I'm still in that where I say I have a couple vehicles that I really like, but I don't like to just say, oh, like I don't like to put myself in that box. I'm very I'm still kind of in a, don't want to call it discovery phase because I don't want to get myself in trouble with any partners, but I'm finding out what I like and what I'm good at, and I'm doubling down on those things right now. But the whole, I guess the intention of just wanting to, basically, I was just thinking about this the other day. It was like, what is my like why, right? Like, everything I do, I just want it to kind of exemplify it. And I think it's about changing the world in a positive way and just continuously doing that. Like, it sounds kind of cliche, but like just like creating things that positively impact the people around me. And that's like an important thing. So I think I will, whatever I've created at that point, it'll be positively impacting the people around me that I keep within my network. And like, that's positive for me. The podcast could still be going. I always say like, I really like, it'd be so cool to like, if you really did this for like, 20 years, like, and go look down and be like, oh, what were you saying at 22? And be like, 45, like just see what that kind of looks like. So podcast could still be doing, but short answer, no, I won't be doing everything, but it'll be with the same kind of like intention.
Got it. Yeah, no, having a podcast definitely is like a digital journal that you have about things that you're interested about. And I ask you this because I migrated to the United States when I was 22. So, a lot of things can happen in life, but I really like your energy and also that you have a why. But I will also say that define what is positive, because positive can mean many things.
Yeah, fair. 100%. I like that. That's good advice. Now, finally, how do you want to be remembered?
Actually, this is another exercise that I did once, which like this exercise was like about a book about branding. So the first exercise was about how do you want to be remembered in your funeral? And I just wrote down, I want to be someone that remembered as someone that created a space for women to share their thoughts. And I wrote this 3 years ago, and this is still what I'm doing it right now.
That's awesome. Well, Lou, thank you so much. I think we got so much out of this, whether it was business, life, travel. I think we really hit on all three, which again, accomplished the goal. So one win today. Any final thoughts? Where can we find you? And I pointed this out at the beginning. Any future, like any projects you're working on that you're like, getting ready to want to talk about.
Yeah, of course. As I already mentioned when I said that I am about to, like, very close to board out, and starting.
Exactly. You're about to release the season. Okay, cool.
So yeah, I have a few things that I'm working on. And then, what was the other question? I'm sorry.
Where can we find you?
Oh, yes, of course. So you guys can find me. My Instagram for the podcast is the Solo Female Traveler Podcast. And then also it's the same name for the podcast. And also my website is loucolmenares.com. And my personal Instagram is the same. So if you guys go to the podcast, or the website, you will find all the info there.
Awesome. And all the links will be in all the bios. Thank you, Lou. That was fun.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay.